And today's project is a steering shaft upgrade. We're going to either replace the whole shaft or major segments of it with a steering shaft off a Jeep Cherokee XJ. Now what you see here is a bolt and it goes through the midsection of the shaft, and that shaft is your steering column shaft. And what a lot of people have been doing have been grinding down this part of the shaft to make it square to match up with the Cherokee and just replacing the whole shaft. I personally don't like that idea. I think a lot of people do that because they don't have any fab skills or equipment. So I'm going to cut this section off and I'm going to use that married or mated onto the Cherokee shaft so that it just goes right on up there. And then down here, this right here is a nut with a spline head on it. Not a star head, but a spline head. And that requires a spline socket. Okay, this is from Harbor Freight. It's a standard size 7-piece spline socket set. This was $10. And I believe the 7/16 right there is the one that we use. Now the reason we're doing this is because of this infamous joint here. It's called a rag joint, and this piece that you see here is actually fabric. Okay, so if you think about it, fabric doesn't have a whole lot of ability to resist lateral play after it's gotten old, and you can actually see where it's warped and deformed and everything. So really this whole steering setup is kind of sloppy, and that leads to slop in your steering wheel. So when you go to steer, it's more movement than necessary. So we're going to upgrade it with this Cherokee shaft. We're either going to do a direct upgrade or we're going to use parts of it. Now right here we're looking at the back side of the retainer bolt, and it doesn't have any head. So what I'm assuming is probably a shaped recess there, and it's like a carriage bolt. Probably slides down in the square or something like that. So the only thing we need to get loose is the nut on the other side, and this should be ready to slide right out. I finally got them separated. Anchored one into a tree, the other end to a geo tracker and 4-low. Give her a little snatch 2 or 3 times. It finally came loose. Damn. This is the shaft end after we hit it ever so lightly with the sanding disc and just cleaned it up real good and smoothed it out, and it'll collapse all the way up to there. So that's going to give us enough play to get this steering shaft on the truck. Well, we're at the point of no return. If you look at the GM shaft, it's got a plastic insert that holds the shaft, and on collision allows the shaft to collapse. And we're at the point of no return. I could not get it to come loose without cutting it off. Now this is the part I want to salvage and I want to put on top. And this is the part that I'm going to check the spline count on this one and see if they match up. If so, I'll just use this on the bottom and cut this off and put this on top. I've done some closer examination. The XJ shaft's not going to work on the steering shaft. I'm going to have to graft both ends. That's got a flat spot on it, and if you look, this is a flat spot. It's a key. So I'm going to cut this off, these ears, and then I'm going to weld this onto the XJ shaft, and then weld on the GM upper part on the XJ shaft. Before I cut this, to graft this spline onto it, I strengthen it up right here. Then I'm just going to cut it here, and that'll give me a solid base to connect to. And I'm only going to weld from about here to here, and then I'm going to leave this section free to flex, because that's the way it was designed to be. And remember, you got some rubber parts down in here, so when you go to work on that, you don't want to heat it up too much. As we look at the shaft centers, we got those lined up almost perfect. Now, we're not putting a man on the moon, so it don't have to be absolutely perfect. But as I said, I'm only going to weld, I probably tacked a little bit too far here, but I'm going to weld around here to about there and probably knock those tacks down with the grinder. And as you can see, if I could hold the camera right, I need to look through the display rather than my actual product. I beveled the shaft so I could get as much weld in there as possible. I got the lower part welded up. It's ready to bolt on, and we're just looking at I got plenty of play here. Whoops. And the next thing I need to do is graft up this upper part, and it is ready to bolt on. There's a weld on the steering box side. I'm real happy with that. 035 on that Eastwood MiG 135. It's just the cat's meow. This is how I jig this up. Like I said, I strengthen this by putting a bead in, and then I'll just cut it flush right here. And I just tack weld a bar into it and clamp it down so I can work on this. Otherwise, you know, there's no way you can get a good solid grip on it. Before I weld right here, I'm test fitting everything. There's my bolt, goes on through, and down here is a spline bolt that goes on, and there's my slip joint. So all I gotta do is just weld that and bolt it up, and I'm done. Well, there she is, all bolted up, ready to roll. And I'll tell you what, except for the weld marks, that very strongly resembles a $350 Borgeson intermediate shaft on it. I think it's done just a fine job.